Up until now, I have been discussing the different genres of fiction that I wanted to reread. But there's another important genre, and that is nonfiction. Nonfiction can be equally exciting and entertaining as fiction. But what sorts of nonfiction books do I want to reread? Hello, welcome to my channel. Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg. This is my sixth in a series of videos of books that I want to reread. Previously, I have focused on 5 different types of genre fiction that I wanted to reread. But today, my focus is nonfiction and what sorts of nonfiction that I like to read. I am going to be rather upfront. To be frank, scholarly nonfiction just does not float my boat. These are books written by subject experts intended to be read by other subject experts. And so they can get the nuance of their subject down and appreciate the differences, or say that this other scholar is completely wrong. If I had a subject expertise, that would probably be computer programming. You could also say that I'm an expert in literature because I did go to university to study literature, but my entire professional life was mostly in computers. I don't want to read about computers for the most part, especially if it's scholarly books about computers. Now, if I were a subject expert in World War II, maybe it would be different. Maybe I would appreciate these scholarly works of World War II and get that nuance of difference and the ideas that I don't agree with. Those are nonfiction books that I really don't like. I like the narrative works of nonfiction that tell a story or tell history in a way that the layman can appreciate. So you will see a lot of that in the books that I am selecting to reread. Now again, these are 12 books that I want to reread. I do not necessarily consider these the top books in nonfiction. They're just books that are sparking my interest and that I want to pick up again. First on the list is The Republic by Plato, approximately written in 325 BCE. I originally read this when I was at university for my class in Greek philosophy. As I remember, I did not actually agree a lot with Plato. This is his idea of the ideal state, the just city, and the just man, and why the just man is happier than the unjust man. And a lot of the details, as I said, I just don't really necessarily agree with, or at least I did not agree with them when I was in my early 20s picking this book up for the first time. I am now much older. How would I feel about Plato's idea of the just society? Would I have more sympathy with it or even more disagreements? I will have to see. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl, originally published in 1946. Frankl was a prisoner in the concentration camps during World War II. He was a psychologist, or eventually became a psychologist. And this book chronicles his observations about life in a concentration camp and how the attitudes towards life, the way people viewed life and their future, affected their ability to survive. Viktor Frankl observed that inmates who were better able to survive the concentration camp had a view and purpose in their lives. Now, I am not going to say that the current times in the United States are anywhere near as harsh as what Frankl went through in the concentration camps, but there is a lot of bad feelings among Americans on both sides of the political spectrum. And I want to see if I can see what Frankl saw. There's a purpose in my life, and see if it's any easier getting over these harsh times in the United States. And hopefully, as I record this, it is going to be a day or two before the 2024 political elections, and I hope there is some easement in the political tensions. Maybe this book will help me observe those and get my feelings about what I think about this whole issue down pat. Hiroshima by John Hersey, originally published in 1946. This is the type of nonfiction that I think I enjoy the most. This is storytelling about real world events. John Hersey told the story about 6 survivors of the bomb blast in Hiroshima, and it is such an engaging book of nonfiction. I originally read this in high school on a class of World War II history. And I think it's about time that I picked this one up again, because I remember just being totally captivated about what these 6 survivors went through when the bomb destroyed their city. This is one of the great works of American nonfiction. I don't think this has ever been out of print since it was published in 1946. Night by Eli Wiesel, originally published in 1960. Wiesel was a Romanian Jew who went to Auschwitz and Buchenwald between 1944 and 1945. And this is his memoir of his life in the concentration camps. It is a short memoir, but it is an extremely powerful work of autobiography, in which Wiesel, who was a devout Jew going in, as I remember, came out of that experience a non-believer. Because how could a God treat his chosen people so terribly to make them suffer so much? And that is what I want to look at again, because he did go through that experience. And indeed, how could a God make his chosen people suffer so much? So that is why I want to revisit this autobiography. Desert Solitaire, A Season in the Wilderness by Edward Abbey, originally published in 1968. This is an autobiographical work, but it's also a work of ecology. It is the story of Abbey and his experiences as a park ranger in the late 50s. He went to Arches National Monument, which I think now is just called Arches National Park. There's a little bit of Walden-esque technique in this book as he describes the flora, the fauna, the geology, and the human inhabitants that come to this park. It is a philosophical work of sorts, of his introspection and his idea of what it means to have a wilderness and to have humans in the wilderness. I myself like to think about the wilderness. I like to think of untamed lands with creatures and plants. But honestly, I don't want to go there for very long. I would probably enjoy a day trip into the wilderness. But if I had to pack my own clothing and my food and the toiletries to live in this wilderness, I would not want to do that at all. So I'm going to have to relive the wilderness through Edward Abbey. In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, originally published in 1969. What can I say? This is like one of the first nonfiction novels that treated a true story as a story that you can read with real characters. It is based on the 1959 murders in a farmhouse, and it's the killers who got caught and convicted and originally put to death by hanging. It is such a fantastic story, really well written and very exciting. And it shows what I said in the beginning is that nonfiction can be a story. It can be entertaining and exciting. It does not have to be a scholarly text. This would be considered true crime. And I first read this long time ago before I got married. So now I want to see what it's like again. Truman Capote has such a great reputation as an author, and I think this is the only work by him that I have ever read. There may be some disagreement about me including this book on a list of nonfiction works, but I first discovered this book when I was a clerk working in Crown Books. It was the late or middle 80s, and it was shelved on the nonfiction side of the store. So when I first read this, I thought it was completely a work of nonfiction. Some people have come up and said this book is more fiction than nonfiction. I am talking about Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, a savage journey into the heart of an American dream by Hunter S. Thompson. It is the story of a journalist going to Las Vegas and doing a lot of drugs over one weekend, or maybe a few more days than a weekend. And again, I first read this, I thought it was completely nonfiction. Maybe people have wised up over the years and have said, Hunter S. Thompson pulled a lot of stretchers in here. He did a lot more than just storytelling. He might have a little bit of fabrication in this. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm including this on my nonfiction list because that is how I was introduced to this book, as a work of nonfiction. And I can reread this with a more critical eye and decide, well, maybe Hunter S. Thompson was fibbing a little bit in this section. Or maybe Hunter S. Thompson was so stoned out of his mind that blur between reality and fiction and his memories just isn't all that clear. But I do remember truly enjoying this book, even though I'm really not any sort of major drug user at all. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, an inquiry into values by Robert M. Pirsig, originally published in 1974. This is the story of Pirsig and his son going on motorcycle trips and his philosophy about riding a motorcycle, about fixing a motorcycle. Because if you're riding a motorcycle a long distance, you have to know how to fix motorcycles to get along better. And it's the study of philosophy. There is a whole chapter about quality. What does it mean for something to have quality, to be well made, to be well done? And maybe something that is not well done. I don't remember all that much about his talk about quality, but I do remember that he talks about it. And he also talks a lot about Buddhism and Zen, because, Zen is in the title of the book. However, it has been said that his interpretation of Zen may not be all that accurate. And his discussion of motorcycle maintenance may be a little weak on the factual details about how to fix a motorcycle. But I think I will enjoy rereading this book. Mouse by Art Spiegelman. The first volume was published in 1991. This is a graphic memoir of Spiegelman talking to his father about his imprisonment in the Polish concentration camps during World War II. His father is a complicated character. It really brings out what it is like to be a survivor of these concentration camps and what that does to the human psychology. I'm really kind of curious to pair this up with man's search for meaning. Now, I have reread this a number of times in my life. I actually just read this about 2 years ago, but as I was looking over the nonfiction books that I want to reread, this book called to me again. It is a graphic memoir, so honestly, it's going to take me about 2 nights to get through this, but it is a very powerful story. Not only the father's dealings with his life in the concentration camp, but the son and how he deals with the father with such emotional distress and harm that was done to him. Really fantastic book, and also shows you just how powerful a graphic novel can be. The Demon-Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark by Carl Sagan, originally published in 1995. I recently talked about this book in my video, 5 Books Hazardous to Your Well-Being. And I said this book was hazardous because it teaches critical and skeptical thinking and how important it is for people to have those abilities to think critically and skeptically in their toolbox. As Carl Sagan said, it helps you build a baloney detection kit to help you avoid falling into those pseudoscientific beliefs that many Americans and many people across the world fall into when they accept beliefs that have no basis in fact. And I think this truly is one of the most important books that you could teach people. It should be taught in high school and colleges to everyone, because the ability to think like a scientist, to have the skeptical thoughts, to have the critical thoughts are just so important. Now, my big concern about rereading this is that I already have that baloney detection kit pretty much down pat in my old age, but maybe I should reread this as a refresher just to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Into Thin Air by John Krakauer, originally published in 1996. Krakauer has also written perhaps one of my top 3 nonfiction works. That is Into Thin Air, and that is his exploration to Mount Everest, where there was a disaster on top of that mountain. Truly fabulous. Into Thin Air was a book written just before that one, and it is the story of a young man who wanted to head out into the wilderness of Alaska. And he had a very bad outcome. He died alone, starving. And it is such a great story about the desire in that wilderness and just not making it. I think this will be a good companion piece to Desert Solitaire, because that one dealt a lot, or will deal a lot, with what people think about the wilderness. And the story of this young man, his name was McKindless, has inspired a lot of people. Not inspired, actually fascinated a lot of people. He was out in the wilderness of Alaska, where there was an old broken down school bus. And so many people, after reading this book, tried to find this school bus that the authorities of Alaska had to remove that abandoned bus because too many people were going to this area and it was too dangerous. I think more people may have died trying to find where McKindless died. So that is in itself is a tragic story. And just the story of this young man. Mortality by Christopher Hitchens, published posthumously in 2012. Christopher Hitchens was one of the great intellects of the 20th century and early 21st century. He was just a marvel to listen to. He was a skeptic. He was an atheist. He was a literary critic. And his intellect was just amazing. But as he was going on a book tour in 2010, he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. And it was a terminal diagnosis. He died in 2011 as he was finishing up this book on mortality. And this is how does an atheist view the end of life, knowing that there is no afterlife waiting for him. I read this when it originally came out. I myself am a non-believer. I am an atheist, so I don't think there's going to be an afterlife waiting for me. Now, fortunately, I don't have any terminal illnesses at this time, but as I'm getting older, I am now 60, I do have to think about my mortality. I do believe I have 20, 25 years, good years left to live and to read, but I want to revisit this book. I want to think about mortality and what the end of life might be like. Am I contemplating that? Okay, that is the end of the 12 nonfiction books that I want to reread. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.